10,000 years into the future, before the annihilation of mankind, spiritual energy had begun to appear. This spiritual energy had led to the evolution of terrifying monsters. Sudden earthquakes struck when a massive penguin monster, Zhulong, appeared out of nowhere, ready to cause massive destruction. People around the vicinity of the attacked area were forced to evacuate for their safety. Battle tanks equipped with explosives and machine guns were deployed against the menace, causing further destruction of the area. Unfortunately, despite their collaborative efforts to take it down, none of it had worked because the creature had withstood every attack, leaving destruction in its trail. Amidst the chaos, an armored figure glowing with energy confronted the menace with a powerful blast of light, which seemed to be their last hope. In a quiet schoolyard, many students gathered outside a famous academy for the awakening ceremony, excited to find out what powers they had. Among them, a silver-haired boy stood alone, his sharp eyes showing confidence and determination. A student named Zhao Wu awakened a fire ability, and his flames glowed brightly. Then, different university personnel gathered around him to convince him to choose their respective universities. When the examiner called, the silver-haired boy stepped forward with confidence, and his serious expression made the crowd wonder what kind of power he would show. When he introduced himself as Lin Shu, a third-year student, the crowd whispered about his family, saying his father had thunder ability. However, some students mocked him, reminding others that his father had once been a traitor. 7 years ago, Lin Shu had been praised as the son of a hero. When a powerful monster attacked the city, Lin Shu's father was accused of being a coward, and the people blamed him for the city's destruction and several casualties, making Lin Shu's life fall apart. Everyone abandoned him, calling him the traitor's son, leaving him to survive alone. At the awakening ceremony, Lin Shu had high hopes of changing his fate if he happened to awaken a strong ability. That said, he placed his hand on the device, but the screen showed no real abilities. Shocked, he stood frozen, and the teacher's awkward reaction made things worse, pushing Lin Shu to nervously ask if the result was correct. Upon receiving the confirmation, Lin Shu's soul left his body in shame. Whispers spread through the room, with others insulting him and his father, so Lin Shu looked at them with a menacing glare, making Zhao Wu explain himself to him. Lin Shu took that chance to tell everyone that his father was not a coward. The teacher warned Zhao Wu not to disrupt the awakening ceremony, as it could result in his disqualification from the process. The teacher then told Lin Shu that students with no awakened abilities could go home already. As Lin Shu stepped outside, the next students awakened impressive powers such as mind control and steel-like skin. Later in the classroom, Lin Shu faced the harsh reality of being ignored and ridiculed. Returning to his desk, he found cruel notes insulting his father and demanding revenge. Though he looked calm, his clenched fist revealed the anger inside him. Suddenly, Qian Hu, the arrogant son of the city's general, confronted him with a mocking smile. Lin Shu then noticed a metal badge on his uniform and felt both surprised and angry when he realized that it was his father's. Qian Hu then ordered him to take it off, exacerbating the conflict. While Lin Shu grabbed his uniform, Qian Hu grinned cruelly as he mocked Lin Shu, calling him a failure for not inheriting his father's power. Then he grabbed his wrist and threw him like a pillow before kicking his ass away. Lin Shu face-planted on the blackboard, and the bullies continued to taunt him for being a loser. The insult hit hard, so Lin Shu turned to face them and asked why they were treating him that way. Qian Hu then grabbed him by the hair and told him not to dare compare his dad to his. Qian Hu's attention shifted upon seeing Lin Shu's necklace, which belonged to Lin Shu's dad. Qian Hu then told Lin Shu that he would crush it before pulling it off his neck. Lin Shu then tried getting it back, but Qian Hu wouldn't make it happen. Then he mocked him for being a weak loser before revealing to him that he had awakened a very strong ability, Power Surge. While Lin Shu sat helplessly as he looked at the eyes of his bully, Qian Hu told him that crushing his precious necklace was not a big deal to him. Lin Shu recalled how the necklace was his last memory of his father, which had been given to him while he was asleep. From then on, he had no knowledge of the whereabouts of his father, and he could only cry in deep sadness. Lin Shu then decided to fight for the necklace, but Qian Hu told him to beg for it and he would spare it. As his grip started becoming tighter, Lin Shu's eyes fearlessly looked at Qian Hu. Then, back with fierce determination, he stood up and lunged toward Qian Hu. His action surprised Qian Hu, and Lin Shu resorted to biting his hand to loosen the necklace. His bite made Qian Hu let go of his necklace, and Lin Shu gave his best to catch his treasured necklace. Pissed off, Qian Hu grabbed his uniform and asked him if he had become a dog that bites people. Qian Hu wanted to take it again, so in that desperate situation, Lin Shu decided to swallow it rather than surrender it to him. Qian Hu's eyes grew in disgust upon seeing the pendant move down his throat, but Lin Shu started mocking him for his failed attempt. Once again, Xianhu threw him like a pillow, and his head hit the wall for the second time. Enraged by how they had treated him, Lin Xiu began recounting how they had treated him both before and after. He then stood up and decided to fight for himself, and as he grit his teeth, he told them that someday he would prove them all wrong. With tears in his eyes, he told the bullies that his father was not a coward and that he had never turned his back on those who needed help. Out of nowhere, the pendant that he swallowed started releasing some sort of mysterious force inside his body. Then when the stone cracked inside him, Lin Xiu felt something weird inside him. Suddenly, his unique blood started some genetic binding, and a digital system appeared in front of him, congratulating him for successfully activating the Monster Overlord system. Then Lin Xiu realized that Xianhu's bullying ultimately helped him awaken his special ability. The system then informed him that, as a reward, he could now acquire a personal monster. Lin Xiu, confused and curious, stared at the screen, questioning what a personal monster was. The system provided an option to confirm, and as Lin Xiu's hand hovered over the confirm button, his thoughts raced about what this new system could mean for him. The system then presented him with his three options. The first one was a massive red dragon known as the Monster King, Kuilong, a monstrous red dragon with immense power. The second option followed, revealing a majestic golden-winged hydra known as the Monster Tyrant Jin Zhuo, which is a monster on par with Kuilong. The third option unveiled a radiant hornet-like creature with butterfly wings known as the Monster Queen Zhao Chong, which possesses strong support abilities. Then the fourth option revealed a fierce, horned gorilla beast known as Star-Breaking Savage Ape Ao Hen, which has the power to shatter stars. Every option radiated immense power, making the decision even harder for Lin Xiu. He then started imagining his bullies begging for his forgiveness. However, with a ticking countdown timer, Lin Xiu was thrown into a state of urgency. Frustrated, he exclaimed that all of the options seemed equally strong and he could not decide which one to choose. However, he also knew to himself that none of the monsters seemed suitable for him. While thinking, he noticed the Monster King emitting thunderbolts, and his eyes shone upon seeing it. That said, he gripped his hand, and with a menacing expression, he declared that he would be inheriting his father's thunder ability. With determination, Lin Xiu chose the Monster King, Kuilong, and the system confirmed it to him. Suddenly, a massive swirling vortex formed in front of him, and it released a massive amount of water, drowning Lin Xiu in the process. Then his body glowed, and as he regained consciousness, he realized that he was in the deep sea. Then the giant green eye of a menacing creature stared down at him, signaling that the world was about to face something far more powerful than ever before. The creature's massive mouth opened, revealing a terrifying maw, and Lin Xiu's expression shifted to one of dread as he realized the immense power and pressure emanating from the menace. He gasped in horror as the overwhelming force of the penguin monster's pressure surrounded him. Caught in the vortex, Lin Xiu was hurled out of the sea and through the air. Lin Xiu could not believe his eyes upon seeing the massive monster lunging in front of him. The impact was strong, making his body hit the surface of the menace's hard skin. Then the Monster King revealed himself, releasing a powerful roar that shook the entire surroundings. Lin Xiu's eyes grew bigger upon realizing that he was standing on the head of the Monster King. Suddenly, he lost balance and fell, but the system opened a portal to send him back to reality. When Lin Xiu recovered, his face was filled with confusion. His bullies stood before him, but he was in great disbelief, wondering if everything that had happened was just a dream. His shock grew upon seeing the system, and he realized it was all real, and that he had actually been given a personal monster. The system congratulated Lin Xiu for successfully completing the setup and receiving his personal monster, Kuilong. As digital confetti rained down, a glowing egg appeared on the screen, confirming the next stage of his journey. Lin Xiu, still in disbelief, stared at the egg, questioning how he was supposed to manage a dragon egg. And just like that, the system bid him farewell and wished him the best of luck. Meanwhile, Lin Xiu asked the system to at least tell him how to hatch the monster egg. Just as Lin Xiu wondered about the egg, his attention was pulled to a commotion in the classroom. One of his bullies accused him of losing his mind, concerned about his erratic behavior. Xianhu, along with others, confronted Lin Xiu. They grabbed him, taunted him, and pulled his pants off to humiliate him. Lin Xiu, furious and struggling to break free, yelled at Xianhu, demanding to be released. Xianhu, still engaged in his antics, laughed mischievously as he violated the school's rules by holding someone in a compromising position. Suddenly, a stern student council member entered the scene, her sharp gaze cutting through the tension. She firmly told Xianhu that his actions had seriously violated school rules and ordered him to release the student and prepare for disciplinary action. Lin Xiu looked at her, and he could not believe that a girl would meddle in his business with the bullies. Xinhu told her that what they were doing was none of her business, but the student council member then commanded Xinhu to turn around and leave. She asserted her authority, stood her ground, and cited Xinhu's violation. Suddenly, Xinhu snatched the pen from the student council member, taunting him with a grin while playing with the pen in his fingers. While the student council seemed pissed off by his behavior, her pen glowed a yellow aura, and it escaped Xinhu's grip, maneuvering towards his mech. When Xinhu asked if she did it, the student council member told him to take it as a warning. Lin Xiu couldn't believe that a girl like her had the ability to control objects. Xinhu then grabbed the pen, and he smirks, surprised to see an awakened person appear in the classroom. Xinhu, however, told her that they were not afraid of her at all before bragging that his ability belonged to a class. Chenghu then broke the pen, but the student council member seemed unfazed. Nonetheless, Xinhu turned to the student council member, warning her to mind her own business if she wanted to be spared. Lin Xiu, filled with disgust, shouted at Xinhu, calling him despicable for his actions. However, right after that, Lin Xiu was punched by one of the bullies. Xinhu looked at his pitiful state before he declared to destroy anyone who would come his way. Then he looked at the student council member again while he gripped his fist. The student council member then told him that the Awakened were humanity's last hope in that era of renewal. Upon hearing that, Lin Xiu wondered if the student council member intended to fight Xinhu and his gang. He felt a little worried, considering the fact that she was clearly outnumbered. That said, Lin Xiu wondered if his dad felt the same way when he faced monsters inside the mystic realm. With a snap of her finger, the broom that was inserted inside Lin Xiu's uniform floated along with him, making the two bullies fall out of balance. Lin Xiu was left dumbfounded, and suddenly, the broom struck itself against the wall, causing it to hang him like a keychain or something similar. The student council member apologized to Lin Xiu for what he had done to him, and she asked Lin Xiu to hold on for a moment as things were about to escalate. Chunhu decided to attack her when suddenly a surge of energy surrounded her as she activated her power. The students inside were left dumbfounded by what they had witnessed. Objects swirled around her in a powerful vortex, and her glowing aura intensified. With a terrifying burst of force, the object shot toward Xinhu, who was caught in the crossfire. The student council member warned him not to move a muscle or he would get hurt. Lin Xiu was in great disbelief to see that a girl like her could easily stop someone like Xinhu. Suddenly, Zhao Wu told Xinhu not to mess with her as he finally recalled who she was. It turned out that she was no other than the student council president Su Lingyu. Xinhu, visibly enraged, started blaming Su Lingyu for meddling with his business. Su Lingyu then moved his hand to command the object to move according to her will. Apparently, she possessed the magnetism ability, and Lin Xiu was left dumbfounded upon seeing her in spiritual aperture, which is one realm higher than everyone else. Xinhu, visibly enraged, gnashed his teeth as he yelled in frustration, telling her not to dare hurt him because his father was a prominent individual. Suddenly, a metallic ruler flew over him, cutting his neck, but not too deeply. Xinhu could not believe that someone would dare to wound him, and Su Lingyu advised him to give up already. She also reiterated that since Chenghu was the one who started the fight, accidentally killing him wouldn't put her to blame. Realizing that she was not playing around, Xinhu began to panic and desperately pleaded for mercy, with tears and sweat pouring down his face as the magnetic weapons hovered threateningly around him. Su Lingyu looked disappointed at his disgraceful look and asked him if he finally understood the weight of being awakened. She removed the materials pointed at him and continued lecturing him about his attitude. Then she activated her magnetic power in front of Xinhu once again and forcibly took the golden badge, tearing his uniform in the process. Su Lingyu looked him in the eye as her hand grabbed the golden badge. Xinhu was left dumbfounded by what had just happened, and Su Lingyu looked at him with extreme domination, telling him to accept his punishment and leave. With just her scary aura, Xinhu's feet betrayed him, and together with his lackeys, they all escaped as fast as they could. He could hardly believe his eyes that a single girl had settled the mess so easily, and at the same time he felt bad for Xinhu, who had been shamed publicly, because he knew that he had really become strong. But despite all that, Su Lingyu can simply end his life instantly. Su Lingyu, with her power still activated, approached him and confirmed if he was Lin Xiu. He confirmed that he is, and she uses her power to remove the broomstick from the wall, causing Lin Xiu to fall to the floor quickly. Su Lingyu looked him in the eye, and for a moment, they awkwardly put themselves in silent mode. However, Su Lingyu's eyes locked on Lin Xiu's banana undergarment, making her blush with the desire in her eyes to unravel his true banana. She then decided to turn around and use her magnetic power to give Lin Xiu his father's badge. Lin Xiu was in awe upon receiving his father's badge, and as Su Lingyu walked away, he thanked her for helping him. However, she told him sternly the lesson non-awakened individuals should have learned, which was to never interfere with the awakened, for the power gap was too much for them to survive. Ling Xiu, with a determined expression, acknowledged her words, affirming that she was right about the dangers. That said, he decided to redeem himself by becoming the monster overlord. At Chennai City First High School, the night lights glowed from one of the classrooms, and a frustrated student shouted his complaints, wondering how long it would take them to finish the endless cleaning. The other one splashed water on the board and began scrubbing furiously, reminding everyone that it was already 8:30. While some of them were arranging the students' desks, others continued to complain. The noise of complaints grew until Qianhu's voice cut through sharply, shouting at them to do what they had been told to do. Qianhu recalled Su Lingyu's scary face and reflected that he had no desire to get tangled up with that girl again. Under the bright moonlight, a pile of books about penguin monsters was on Lin Qiu's table. He had been researching ever since the system appeared before him, because when he had faced the Monster King, he truly felt his immense power. While finding a way to hatch the dragon egg, the system appeared before him, giving him the mission to hatch the Kuei Long with a reward of a taming skill. Stating that, Lin Xiu screamed with happiness, asking where the system had been running all day. The system informed him that since the Kuei Long was still in its incubation period, it would remain in power-saving mode and would only be activated in critical situations. That said, the owner should hatch his monster as soon as possible. However, Lin Xiu told the system that he had already searched everywhere, but had not found a single mention of how to hatch a pengu monster egg. The system announced that it was normal because hatching a pengu monster egg takes longer than the entire duration of human evolution. Lin Xiu was stunned when the system claimed that hatching the egg would take 5 to 6 million years. That was impossible, but the Monster Lord system explained it had a method to speed things up through a monster crystal core. These cores condense spiritual energy, accelerating growth and ensuring survival. The slow development of the pengu monster was due to Earth's lack of spiritual energy, but the core could solve that. When Ling Xiu asked where to find one, the system revealed that a crystal core was already in his home. Excited, he wondered if his mother had hidden such a treasure, but the system displayed an image of a metal badge. It was his father's metal, forged from the crystal core of a mega monster, holding enough energy for the incubation. Memories of ridicule as a traitor's son resurfaced, and Lin Xiu silently vowed to clear his father's name. However, if not for the girl's help earlier, Lin Xiu would have lost his father's metal forever. He still lacked the strength to clear his father's name, yet he couldn't even protect the metal. Digging through his backpack, he pulled it out and asked the system how to proceed. The system explained that monsters couldn't yet be stored in carrier space, so the first step was to materialize the Kuei Long's egg. Suddenly, the system turned into a laser pointer and started sketching an egg shape on the wall, leaving Lin Xiu stunned. The system confirmed the egg was ready and instructed him to insert the crystal core. Lin Xiu was completely clueless about what was happening, but the system instructed him to follow its instructions. Hesitant, Lin Xiu pressed the metal against the wall, and it was pulled in and melted before his eyes, merging with the surface. Lin Xiu was left dumbfounded by what he was witnessing, and the badge completely merged with the walls. Lin Xiu began to feel scared about what was happening, and the wall where the egg was drawn started to crack. Lin Xiu moved closer and started touching the cracks, but the cracks spread rapidly and the wall collapsed, knocking him back in a storm of dust and rubble. While the dust subsided, Lin Xiu carefully looked at the broken wall. Then his eyes grew in surprise because out of the ruins stepped a small red dragon, slowly making its way toward him. Lin Xiu could only stare in awe, convinced he was witnessing the rebirth of the legendary pengu monster. The system appeared, displaying Kuei Long's status, revealing that it was in its juvenile stage with an overlord bloodline. Lin Xiu was furious and began ranting at the system because the powerful dragon he had seen before was not the same as what he had received. Suddenly, another system declared that he had completed Task 1 and urged him to accept the reward. Though annoyed at the sudden shift, he got excited with the reward he received, which happened to be a taming skill that he could activate by touching their lower jaw. Ling Xiu's eyes lit up, exclaiming why such a divine skill hadn't been given sooner. However, the system clarified that it only worked on monsters whose level did not exceed his personal monster's level. Lin Xiu groaned, realizing nothing came free because even the pengu egg he obtained by chance required cultivation, and now the taming skill came with limits. Just then, Kuei Long approached and bit his pants, forcing Lin Xiu to push it away in protest. Kuei Long ran around him as if trying to say something, then suddenly ran off happily and started munching on its broken shell, shocking Lin Xiu in the process. Lin Xiu then remembered that reptiles often ate their shells for nutrients, so he let the dragon continue. While he petted it, he started to worry that the system might expect him to nurture it for millions of years. Suddenly, Kui Long began choking and Lin Xiu also began to panic, making him strike its back, while yelling for it to be okay because he couldn't afford to lose something tied to his father. Then a system appeared again, congratulating him for Kui Long having successfully devoured the eggshell, earning 5 evolution points in the process. More prompts followed, granting 15 then 18 points in rapid succession. Shocked, Lin Xiu accused the system of malfunctioning, but before he could react further, Kui Long's body glowed and swelled. And just like that, another prompt from the system confirmed that the dragon had spent points to grow, advancing within the juvenile stage. Its size and strength surged, attacks expanded, and its overlord bloodline remained upgradable. The larger Kui Long toppled joyfully onto his master, while Lin Xiu struggled beneath its weight, shouting in confusion at the system. Lin Xiu realized that Kui Long's sudden growth came from its innate ability to devour. While he was pinned beneath the dragon's weight, he groaned for it to move before his waist snapped. Then the door handle turned and panic shot through him as his mother walked in carrying groceries. She was about to ask him, but her words froze as she spotted the red dragon on her son. Shock overtook her. She screamed and collapsed in terror. Lin Xiu rushed to her side, insisting that Kui Long was harmless and not his personal monster. He even urged the dragon to greet her, but Kui Long's sharp fangs and claws scared her, sending her into unconsciousness. Stressed out, Lin Xiu tried to beg the system to store it away, but the system flatly reminded him that carrier space could not yet contain monsters. With no other choice, Lin Xiu shoved Qin toward the window, muttering that he would have to hide it first and explain to his mother later. Kui Long glared at the window as if it were a cage, then suddenly tore through it with his claws. Kui Long mustered its strength, and soon enough glass and concrete exploded across the room, leaving Lin Xiu dumbfounded. The noise drew 3 neighbors, who rushed in, asking about the commotion as alarms blasted. Panic gripped Lin Xiu because if anyone saw Kui Long, everything would be ruined. He shoved the dragon toward the opening and wrapped himself in a blanket. Before leaving, he shouted an apology to his unconscious mother, promising to explain everything later. While the neighbors tried to revive his mother, Lin Xiu climbed onto Kui Long's back and leaped in midair. His mother regained consciousness, shouting that her son was up to trouble again and cursing through the gaping hole in the wall as her fist raised in fury. Hidden in the bushes with Kui Long under a blanket, Lin Xiu muttered that she had recovered fast and was just as fierce as ever. Deciding it was wiser to wait until she calmed down, he swatted at insects and asked the system if the dragon could really evolve endlessly through devouring. Suddenly, the system prompt confirmed that by devouring spiritual energy, the dragon could grow without limit, shocking Lin Xiu with the system's unusual diligence. Another prompt appeared, displaying an image of food, which made Kui Long drool over it. Then the system revealed a new feature called Monster Radar. Suspicious, Lin Xiu scoffed at yet another half-useful gift, demanding details. The system explained that the radar allowed the host to detect nearby sources of spiritual energy and gauge their concentration. The system explained that Monster Radar would help Kui Long strengthen himself by locating sources of spiritual energy to devour. Intrigued, Lin Xiu studied the display and figured out that the brightest point at the center was Kui Long. The smaller dots behind him represented the eggshell fragments, and larger dots indicated higher concentrations of energy. Meanwhile, Kui Long imagined food and swallowed it whole in his mind, ignoring Lin Xiu in the process. Lin Xiu was left confused after seeing a source of energy that was even bigger than Kui Long's. As he zoomed in on it, he realized that their situation was like the game Snake, where the more Kui Long eats, the bigger it becomes. However, to Kui Long's imagination, eating was simply devouring the best food that he liked. Lin Xiu realized his partner was a glutton, but a glutton that grew stronger with every bite meant unstoppable power. That said, he threw a blanket over both of them, boasting that no one would notice. Kui Long sprinted off, the blanket flapping wildly as they continued their journey. Not long after, they had reached the street near their target location. Then they eventually arrived at the marked location from the radar, leaving Lin Xiu confused. Because instead of a monster's lair, they faced a residential building with guards and turnstiles. The heavy security puzzled Lin Xiu, but as he hesitated, Kui Long growled as if daring his master to figure out how to get inside. Lin Xiu warned Kui Long not to do anything reckless, but Kui Long whipped its tail and leaped skyward, climbing the building with its claws. While terrified, Lin Xiu realized that such sturdy buildings built after the invasion were hardly taking damage at all. They continued climbing to their target location and soon reached a balcony where laundry hung to dry. As they brushed against the cloths line, he realized with dread that they had barged into a girl's bedroom. The thought of being caught and humiliated throughout the city made him break out in a cold sweat. However, Kui Long suddenly sniffed the floor, catching the scent of spiritual energy. Its eye grew bigger, and the thought of eating something good activated his devouring mode. Kuai Long charged forward, and Lin Xiu quickly grabbed its tail, begging it not to break into someone else's home. Amidst the chaos, his eyes landed on a curious object, which was the emblem of a guild. On Blue Star, most spiritual energy was sealed within hidden realms known as the Mystic Realm. Bathed in that energy, these dimensions birthed treasures and deadly monsters alike, making their study and awakening a pursuit of immense value. The Mystic Realm was tightly regulated worldwide, and guild emblems served as passes into it. Each awakened one could design their own emblem, giving every emblem a unique appearance. Lin Xiu picked up the emblem with Qin at his side, only to spot a girl's shadow nearby. Realization struck, making his face flush crimson, and his nose began to bleed because the emblem belonged to Su Lingyu. Panicked, he flailed his arms, horrified that the system had dragged him into her room. Lin Xiu wanted to abort the mission, but the thought of delicious food wouldn't make Kuai Long listen to him. Ling Xiu knew that he was screwed up and asked the system if it wanted to eliminate him. Suddenly, the shower was off, and Su Lingyu asked who was outside. Lin Xiu knew that monster or not, she would slice them into sashimi, but Kuai Long was unfazed, and Lin Xiu whispered that this was truly the end. The bathroom door creaked open, and Su Lingyu stepped out, wrapped in nothing but a towel. A little earlier, Su Lingyu had just finished her shower, replaying the afternoon in her mind. The unawakened needed to learn not to provoke the awakened, even if it meant being harsh. Lin Xiu acted like a hero's son, but in truth, he was weak, and she scolded herself for expecting anything from him. Su Lingyu's thoughts broke when the amulet clattered to the floor. Alarmed, she spun toward the noise and demanded to know who was there. Rushing to the door, she caught a glimpse of a blanket vanishing over the balcony. Outside, Kuai Long had seized Lin Xiu by the scruff and leaped into the night. Lin Xiu screamed in terror as they plummeted from a 40-story fall. They plummeted down the side of the building before slamming into the ground, leaving a dent. Dazed but alive, Lin Xiu groaned that he had survived, while Qin only licked his lips, consumed by hunger. Then the system appeared, which meant Task 2 had been activated, but Lin Xiu roared at it in disbelief as to why a person was marked as a dot on the radar. The system calmly explained that awakened beings, like monsters, contain spiritual energy born from the revival of Blue Star, making them identical on the display. Finally, it teased that the reward for completing Task 2 would certainly please him before asking him if he didn't want to take a look. Lin Xiu jabbed his finger at the air, telling the system that it should have warned him. A new prompt appeared, showing that Task 2 was to raise his personal monster's growth stage, with the reward being an ability called Projection. Lin Xiu groaned that the system had caused him nothing but trouble in less than a day. He was about to dismiss it again when curiosity struck about what Projection was. Breaking its own rules, the system explained that for a limited time, a host could merge with the projection of his monster and gain 30% of all its attributes. Lin Xiu became interested and started checking 30% of Kuai Long's stats. On the radar, Kuai Long's value matched Su Lingyu's, which meant that if he'd absorbed a fraction of that power, he would instantly leap to the middle stage of blood condensation. Excited, he shouted in joy, but Kuai Long ignored him, picturing only food in its mind. He held up two claws, glaring at his master, and Lin Xiu stuttered, realizing the dragon was keeping score. First the eggshell, then the spiritual energy source. He tried to brush it off, muttering that it was better to count on himself than rely on others. Lin Xiu twirled the amulet in his fingers and proudly showed it to Kuai Long. This wasn't just a trinket. It was the guild's emblem, a pass into the mystic realm. Before long, they reached the identification gate, and Lin Xiu peeked out from under the blanket, flashing the emblem with a grin. This would lead them straight into Mystic Realm 86, the closest one nearby. Inside, Qin could gorge himself on spiritual energy without restraint. The dragon's eyes gleamed at the thought, and Lin Xiu smiled too. Luckily, this realm was only E rank with lax security and no guards in sight. Holding up the emblem, he slipped them past the system without issue. The place looked like an abandoned construction site, shut down after the realm appeared. Kuai Long sniffed the air, then pointed ahead, where a portal shimmered in the distance, radiating blue energy that pulled them in like a tide. Lin Xiu asked if this was truly the entrance to Mystic Realm 86, though the answer was obvious. They stepped closer, and his heart raced from the thought of going inside. Though he lacked the gifts of an awakened, though he had lost everything his father left behind, this was his chance, and it could be his first step toward changing everything. The portal swallowed them whole, and in the blink of an eye, they stood inside a vast forest. Strange creatures darted through the sky and crawled along the trees. Lin Xiu pulled back the blanket and whispered in awe upon looking around the Mystic Realm 86. Although it belongs to a lower rank, it is still quite distinct from the outside world. Kuai Long examined many different insects and creatures, after which he was very pleased. He began to look out for his prey and rush after it with joyful eyes. Lin Xiu fell from his back, hit the ground hard, and screamed out of pain. In a fit of running, Kuai Long tripped over a stone and fell to the ground on his belly. Lin Xiu begged him to behave more adequately. After all, they are in a mystic realm. Kuai Long lay on the ground with a disappointed face, after which he suddenly stood up and put his paws on his sides, making Lin Xiu wonder what Kuai Long was up to. Kuai Long tried to fill his lungs with air completely, after which he let out a powerful roar that caused other creatures to scatter. Lin Xiu fell down in surprise and asked Kuai Long why it was screaming so loudly. He hinted to his master that he should turn around, and behind Lin Xiu stood a huge bear with a long tongue. He turned around and started screaming upon seeing the monster. However, the system then appeared with information that he had nothing to fear because he had shown up on crucial moments. Lin Xiu felt happy, so he hugged and told the system that at decisive moments, he can count on it. The system notified him that what lay before him was not a monster at all, but just an ordinary creature of the prehistoric period. However, the monster swung its claws at the main character and almost hit him. The monster missed and hit the tree, causing it to fall, and part of the tree blocked the road and almost reached Lin Xiu when it fell. Lin Xiu began to worry and said that if the felled tree had hit him, he would have already turned into a smushed meat. Lin Xiu pointed at the monster and furiously scolded the system for calling such a beast an ordinary creature. Another prompt appeared, revealing that he had activated the monster encyclopedia. It explained that some prehistoric creatures had slipped into the mystic realms during the world's changes, surviving there by absorbing spiritual energy. The so-called monster before him was a short-faced bear, the largest and strongest of its kind, though still insignificant compared to true monsters. Stating its dot on the radar no bigger than Kuai Long's, Lin Xiu regained his confidence. Smiling, he declared that the monster was the perfect practice for his first trip into the mystic realm and ordered Kuai Long to attack. However, nothing happened, and both he and the bear froze in silence, waiting for the dragon, which never appeared. Grabbing his head in panic, Lin Xiu demanded answers, so the system admitted it could not explain everything because Kuai Long was the only creature with its own will. Before he could react, the enraged bear lunged at him, and Lin Xiu screamed for his dragon to appear. Before he was about to be killed, a thunderous noise split the air, followed by flashes of lightning. Kuai Long suddenly charged from the side, ramming the bear with brutal force and tearing away a third of its health. Stunned, Lin Xiu cheered as his dragon struck again with his tail, then soared upward to unleash a dive attack that left the beast barely clinging to life. With a final leap, Kuai Long snapped its neck and crushed its spine with its weight, ending the battle with a total KO. Lin Xiu exhaled in relief, thinking how lucky he had been back then. Kuai Long then faced the monster, drooling, and it loomed over the corpse until Lin Xiu laughed and urged him to eat it. Lin Xiu thought that devouring meant evolution points and evolution meant strength. The system confirmed that once Kuai Long reached a new growth stage, the power projection ability would be unlocked, allowing Lin Xiu to borrow 30% of his monster's attributes. Happily, Kuai Long feasted on the massive bear while system prompts tallied the points. Lin Xiu's smile faded when the total came to only 19 because, despite the dragon's full belly, the reward felt disappointingly small. Lin Xiu reluctantly spent all remaining points on his dragon, and Kuai Long glowed faintly, but the growth was only 3 centimeters. Realizing that spiritual energy was scarce in the mystic realm and prehistoric beasts offered little progress, Lin Xiu activated the monster radar. Soon he spotted a strong source of energy and urged Kuai Long to stop gnawing bones, promising real me ahead. Riding his dragon, Lin Xiu marveled at its speed as they closed the distance. Suddenly, new dots appeared all around the radar, so Kuai Long halted, dust rising as countless glowing eyes surrounded them. Lin Xiu realized they had walked into a den of monsters, and from the shadows, mutant dogs crept closer, growling. The system identified them as E-rank monsters, a small pack of hunters with cat-like movements, ultrasonic perception, and vicious teeth. Lin Xiu exhaled, patted his dragon, and muttered that at least Kuai Long now had the perfect chance to sharpen his teeth. Lin Xiu faced the monsters and showed them an insulting sign with his fingers. He asked who they thought they were, calling them nothing more than dinner, and shouted that they should come if they dared. The dogs pounced, and one of them opened its mouth to bite the dragon. Kuai Long caught the dog and immediately swallowed it, and Lin Xiu watched happily as the system prompt displayed the addition of evolution points. Lin Xiu was delighted and said that the reward for 1 mutant dog was higher than for 26 short-faced bears. He had never thought you would gain so much from such monsters. If that was the case, then they only needed to charge into the attackers and let Kui Long eat until his stomach gave out, turning him into an adult in a single meal. Kui Long began to drool with joy and ran at the dogs with hungry eyes, devouring the monsters one after another. Many system prompts appeared, announcing the addition of evolution points. Lin Xiu was overjoyed and exclaimed that he had received 2,502 evolution points in the blink of an eye. He shouted for the system to spend all the points on Kui Long's development, and the system prompts appeared, confirming that all evolution points had been spent. The dragon's constitution increased and Kui Long began to glow and grow rapidly. Lin Xiu tried to keep his balance, but he screamed in fear. When it was over, Lin Xiu exhaled in relief and said that he had barely escaped because a little more and he would have fallen off the dragon. A system prompt appeared, describing the increased height and weight of the dragon. Lin Xiu looked closely at the progress of the task and saw that after devouring several dogs, the process had already reached halfway, making him feel overjoyed. Then he thought that if Kui Long managed to devour them all, he would definitely obtain the projection of power, which would already be a worthy result for his first visit to the mystic realm. Among all the dogs, there was a special white mutant which differed not only in color, but also in size from the others. The white dog began to howl, and Lin Xiu saw this and realized that this creature acted as their leader. He wondered what it had just told the others and why he felt that their gazes had changed. One of the monsters suddenly launched a furious attack on him, so Lin Xiu was terrified and screamed, wondering why they all aimed at him now. Kui Long reacted quickly and spun around to avoid the strike, but the dog managed to cling to the dragon and bite through its thick skin. Lin Xiu was shocked and thought that Kui Long had protected him without even considering his own safety. Another dog mocked them from the other side and was prepared to attack, but Lin Xiu realized that they were throwing one after another at him. He wondered whether this was really an order from the leader or if they were using him while they themselves were able to tie up the dragon. Then they began to surround them and bite the dragon, and Lin Xiu thought that this would not work at all. He knew that they could not let this continue, and even though the mutants might only be of low rank, their fangs could easily bite through the dragon's scale. If they finally dared to attack as a pack, it would have dire consequences. Lin Xiu then declared that there was only a little time left until the completion of system task number 2, from which he would gain a new skill. It was obvious these creatures were not going to give him that opportunity. Lin Xiu realized that wherever he went, it was the same because there were always creatures that bullied the weak yet yielded to the strong. He shouted furiously that they were wrong about one thing because even if he might be a weakling without awakened abilities, he would not allow them to gain the upper hand. He touched his dragon and asked if it saw the tree because he needed to find a way to get to it. Kui Long growled in agreement as they prepared their escape plan. The red dragon ran in circles around all of his rivals. Lin Xiu thought that the plan was too risky, but he decided to give it a try. If the mutants loved to pounce on the weak so much, he would give them that opportunity, and as soon as Lin Xiu and Kui Long separated, their attention would be scattered. At the same time, Kui Long would not be his protection, who would be able to roam freely. He was sure that it would not take much time for this glutton to get a promotion. The only thing he was not sure about was how long he could hold out surrounded by mutant dogs. They almost reached that tree, and Lin Xiu thought that in school he often played on the monkey bars. He thought that such a height would not be a problem for him. So he jumped from the monster's head to the branch of the tree. Kui Long began to roar in response to his decision, but Lin Xiu shouted insults at him and told him to eat as fast as he could. Kui Long then looked at his enemies and licked his saliva while Lin Xiu began shouting to attract the mutant dog's attention, telling them to call their ancestors back from their home. They then surrounded the tree on which Lin Xiu was hanging, so he began to scream in panic. For so many of them had come in such a short time. The monsters began to ram the tree, causing Lin Xiu to lose his grip and begin to fall. He screamed for the system to use all the evolution points he had received right now, and the system prompt popped up with the information that 2,100 evolution points have been used up. He fell to the ground, and a pack of mutant dogs ran straight at him, and almost immediately, one of the dogs jumped on him with a furious attack. Lin Xiu began to get up from the ground and scream at the monster to attack him if they could. In that instant, he easily threw the trunk of the felled tree towards the monsters, causing it to pierce their bodies. The innards of that mutant dog were flying everywhere, and Lin Xiu was very surprised by this and wondered how he got the power of a monster. At that moment, Lin Xiu noticed his hand had transformed and looked like the claw of Kui Long. As Lin Xiu plummeted from the tree, panic seized him because he knew that if he landed among the mutant dogs, they would tear him apart. Desperation drove him to scream at the system, demanding it spend all his evolution points at once. A system prompt popped up with information that 2,182 evolution points had been used up. His dragon evolution had increased, thus Kuilong had reached the adult stage. Lin Xiu cursed the system, shouting that it was useless because he was having an emergency, and wondered why it was taking so long for it to respond. He then demanded the reward for the second task immediately, so the system prompt popped up with information that the task had been successfully completed. The reward for the completed task had already been provided, and the system asked him to accept it immediately. Lin Xiu looked at the task prompt, and then a laser pointer appeared in his hand. He looked at it and remembered that this was the same thing that had appeared after the materialization of the Kuilong's egg. A system notification popped up confirming it and informing Lin Xiu that it was called the Monster Projection Tube. To use it, the wearer first needed to put its end to their eye. Then, using the rotating mechanism, they could find the projection of the desired monster. After that, the system instructed him to press the button to make the projection. Lin Xiu tried to figure out this thing while falling, so when he hit the ground, he complained that everything had made it complicated for him. After he fell, he randomly pressed the button and was able to aim the device at himself. The formidable mutant dog lunged at him with a furious attack, but Lin Xiu was already on the ground with hands like Kuilong and threw a tree trunk at the monster. He screamed that they should attack and declared that he would finish them all off. Lin Xiu looked at his hands, which were wrapped in lightning, and was surprised by what he saw. Moments later, 4 dogs rushed toward him, and he realized that this pack still thought of him as a weakling, daring to show off as if he were beneath them. Placing his hand on the tree, Lin Xiu spoke with a confident expression, declaring that it was time for them to return to their place. With all of his strength, Lin Xiu tore the tree out by its roots, and while holding it above himself, he shouted that he was no longer a mediocrity and commanded them to die. He hurled the massive trunk at the dogs, but the monsters dodged the strike and kept charging. Shock spread across Lin Xiu's face as he shouted in disbelief, wondering how they could be so agile. It seemed he would have to face them head-on, but at that moment, Kuilong appeared behind the dogs, deliberately making his presence known so the monsters could hear him. The creatures froze, hesitating as they tried to decide what to do next, but Kuilong devoured them all at once. A system prompt appeared displaying the addition of evolution points as he swallowed them almost whole. Standing in front of his master, Kuilong's form had changed so drastically that Lin Xiu barely recognized him. His height and weight had increased greatly, and Lin Xiu was stunned, realizing that the dragon had only just reached the adult stage and had already grown so much. He admitted to himself that the growth rate of panga monsters was truly impressive. Lin Xiu studied him carefully and asked what the matter was. He promised to provide him with a feast, and the red dragon exhaled furiously in response. Lin Xiu thought that his dragon had changed greatly and had become far more dangerous, so the two locked eyes in silence. Then Kuilong lifted his master, placing him gently on his head. Lin Xiu was deeply surprised by this act and questioned why Kuilong had chosen to carry him that way. Kuilong sensed a strange smell nearby, one that did not belong only to the dogs. Lin Xiu asked Kuilong if he knew about birds stealing shiny things and putting them in nests, but he had never heard of dogs doing such a thing. He created a dragon's nose in place of his own and told Kuilong to wait while he tried smelling the scent of the emblem. They approached the point from which the smell emanated, and Kuilong said they were there. Lin Xiu told him they needed to see what was inside, so the dragon moved forward and lifted everything that blocked the passage to a small pit. Lin Xiu said that he found the emblem there, but in addition to the emblem, there were also small mutant dogs. Judging by their appearance, he knew they would not give it up so easily, and the system prompt popped up with information about the small mutant dogs. They were small in height and weight, low-growing creatures with standard instincts, highly developed fangs, fruit-eating teeth with a strong bite force, and an extremely warlike character. Lin Xiu asked if they were the cubs of pseudo-mutant dogs, so the system questioned whether he had a bad memory for faces, because they did not resemble them at all. Small mutant dogs were ordinary, low-growing dogs that, under the influence of spiritual energy, had transformed into small, monstrous creatures. They were small in size, so alone they did not pose a major threat, but given their warlike nature, when gathered in numbers and without hesitation, they would attack their enemy. The monsters lunged at Kuilong's leg and tried to bite it, but Kuilong looked down at them and understood that they could do nothing to him. The dragon then shook its leg, detaching all the small monsters from itself. Then he looked at them with hungry eyes, but Lin Xiu quickly stood in front of him, shouting at him not to rush into eating. He even told Kuilong to leave them to him because he wanted to try taming them himself. About 45 minutes earlier, Su Lingyu stood silently on her balcony. She looked around carefully and said that someone had managed to sneak onto the terrace of the 45th floor, yet he had not been able to move quietly. She wondered if it was done by an awakened extraordinary sensory acrobat with enhanced physical abilities, but she wondered if humans could create such a big pit from a falling impact. Su Lingyu thought about it and noticed a piece of a banana-patterned blanket, and she immediately thought of Lin Xiu. She remarked that she doubted anyone else would have such poor taste. It turned out that earlier in the day, during her routine rounds, she had briefly sensed a monster. When she followed the direction of the aura, however, she only found a gang of students causing trouble in a classroom. Afterward, she checked their student memos, which all showed standard abilities. But if a feeling she had experienced at that moment was not mistaken, then indeed Lin Xiu, who had not officially awakened, was the most suspicious. Su Lingyu went down to the first floor of her house, wondering if such a thing was possible. It had never happened before that the equipment used to detect awakened individuals and their abilities had failed. She had also never heard of an ability that allowed someone to control monsters. She thought that if Lin Xiu truly was hiding such an ability, why did he allow himself to be bullied so openly during the day without responding to his offenders? There was one thing she could be certain of. If Lin Xiu had awakened an ability that allowed him to control a monster, then it would explain all the strange events that had occurred that day. She approached the hole in the ground, placed her hand inside it, and frowned. On the contrary, new questions were now arising as to why that boy had broken into her house in the middle of the night and how he had known where she lived. Suddenly, Su Lingyu's phone rang and she was slightly surprised, so she pulled it out to check. A message appeared because a red-level situation had occurred in the E-rank mystic realm, so she frowned, wondering what was going on. At that same moment, inside the territory of that mystic realm, Lin Xiu stood between the small mutant dogs and his dragon. He shouted at Kui Long to stop and not to rush to eat them, and this was already the third time he had stepped in between him and his food. He opened the system radar and pointed out that the dots representing these small monsters were no larger than the one belonging to the short-faced bear. Even if they were eaten, the reward would barely reach 10 evolution points. Instead, he wanted to leave them to himself and try using taming. The system had explained that to activate this ability, the target's level must be lower than that of his destiny monster. Lin Xiu recalled that when he first received the taming ability, he had wondered if there were any monsters weaker than a fruit, yet in just 2 hours, Kui Long had already grown so large. Suddenly, the small dogs leaped at him and bit his hand, startling him with the unexpected attack. In panic, he cried out for help. Then his hand transformed, changing into the claw of a dragon. Lin Xiu shouted in joy, realizing that it no longer hurt at all, and that the projecting force was far more useful than he had imagined. The system, however, quickly reminded him that the temporary limit of the ability was nearly reached. If he failed to shake off the small dogs before it ended, he would suffer serious injuries. Kui Long could not help but laugh at the sight of his master flailing with the little beasts attached to his arm. Lin Xiu snapped back, asking if the dragon intended to help or just watch, so Kui Long explained that he was afraid of harming the very pets his master intended to tame. Realization struck Lin Xiu. After all, his goal was to subdue them, not destroy them. That said, he steadied himself, focused on taming, and reached out to gently touch the chin of one small dog, waiting for the ability to take hold. A system window popped up, informing Lin Xiu that he had successfully subdued the little mutant dog. The creature's eyes suddenly brightened, and it leaped from his arm and began barking fiercely at its brothers. The others stared back in confusion, unable to understand what was happening to him. Lin Xiu, surprised, declared that the little dog was now angry at those who had bitten him. As expected of his faithful henchman, the dog wagged its tail happily at his words. Another system window appeared, announcing that he had tamed 2 more small mutant dogs. The 3 creatures hopped about in a circle of camaraderie, while the red dragon stood off to the side, silent and watching with thinly veiled displeasure. A new system message followed, stating that given the current level of the ability, the total number of monsters Lin Xiu could tame was limited to 5. At that moment, he already had 4 under his command, so the smile on his face instantly vanished. He threw the small dogs aside and roared in fury, while the system responded with another prompt. In any case, there was no need to worry because the system had a method to resolve the issue. By accomplishing mission number 3, which is to obtain a monster's crystal core that can upgrade the Monster Overlord system to level 2, along with the ability known as Monster Space. Lin Xiu's expression darkened as he read the words, and he muttered that he had been wondering what the method would be, only to realize it was another system task. This time, however, it was also an opportunity for personal advancement. The system added that upgrading the Monster Master system brought immense benefits. Not only would evolution accelerate, but every current ability in use would have a chance to be strengthened. Lin Xiu said with a dissatisfied expression that it was easy for the system to say, but crystal cores were not something that could be found lying around everywhere. To incubate his dragon, he had even been forced to sacrifice his father's metal, and no matter how one looked at it, such a resource was impossible to find within an E-rank mystic realm. He let out a long breath, turned to his dragon, and muttered that they needed to return quickly and return Su Lingyu's emblem before she discovered it missing. Picking up one of the small mutant dogs, he ordered it to hand over the emblem. In response, the creature licked his face, and the others pounced on him as well, smothering him with affection until he was pressed flat against the ground. Lin Xiu shouted at them to restrain themselves, but Kui Long tilted his head and mocked him. Struggling to free himself from the furry onslaught, Lin Xiu took the emblem back by force. Suddenly, the emblem flew from his grasp, along with one of the small dogs, and it bounced across the ground. Lin Xiu reached out to get it, but froze when his eyes caught sight of the image inside. The emblem was fashioned like a pendant, holding a photograph within. Then he was in great disbelief to see that the photo of his father was hidden inside this girl's emblem. His thoughts spun out of control, and he wondered if he had stumbled upon the truth of his father's disappearance by sheer accident. Before he could think further, his phone buzzed, and his sudden ringing made him confused. Picking it up, he saw the caller ID displayed an unknown caller, so he frowned, wondering who would contact him at such an hour. Answering the call, he was met with a furious voice from Su Lingyu, who shouted at him without pause, accusing him of sneaking into her house earlier and stealing her mom's emblem. Lin Xiu began to smile awkwardly and offered excuses, and he asked what she was talking about, though deep inside he suspected that she had already discovered the missing emblem. Su Lingyu's voice cut sharply, telling him to drop the act because she knew he was currently inside Mystic Realm A86. 15 minutes ago, she had received an urgent notice from the Mystic Realm Control Center. A monster reaction above the 2nd grade had been detected within that realm. Lin Xiu was shocked by the information he received and wondered how a monster of the 2nd grade or above could appear there. Mystic Realm A86 was classified as E-rank, which meant the monsters within should weigh no more than a ton. That was the reason why it served as a training ground for awakeners at the primary stage. Monsters above the 2nd grade, however, possessed the strength of the higher stage, which means they were extremely dangerous. Lin Xiu then realized that 10 minutes ago a monster above the 2nd grade had indeed appeared. It was at that exact moment that Kui Long underwent his evolution, breaking through to that level. Their words collided and they fell into silence, trying to make sense of the situation. Su Lingyu's composure cracked and she asked if he could still hear her. Lin Xiu began to worry that the monster above the 2nd grade, which the system had detected, was his dragon, and if that was true, then they were completely doomed. Lin Xiu had been so focused on raising his level that he had completely forgotten about the strict monitoring systems of the Mystic Realms. A monster of that size and classification could never go unnoticed, and for his own sake, he had to escape before the problem could escalate further. He brushed her off, saying that while her explanation made the situation sound serious, he didn't really understand what it had to do with him. Su Lingyu, holding a piece of blanket in her hands, smiled faintly and told him that he would understand soon. What Lin Xiu had yet to realize was that the Mystic Realms were not limited to online access control systems. They were most notorious for their unmatched security and prevention mechanisms. According to Su Lingyu's calculations, the Special Operations Bureau's auxiliary squad had already arrived at the scene. They were cordoning off the area and beginning their inspection, so Lin Xiu was dumbfounded and shouted in disbelief. The Special Operations Bureau had been alerted to the fact that this was a huge problem. Lin Xiu seemed to realize the seriousness of his situation because the emergency message had already been sent out. From Fate Point forward, he was on his own, and if he and Kui Long managed to escape the Mystic Realm safely, he could contact her again. Before hanging up, she reminded him about her emblem that he had stolen, so Lin Xiu thought bitterly because she already knew everything. If the opportunity arose, he would have to meet her discreetly to have a talk. He pressed open the system prompt and reminded himself that their first priority was to escape. Kui Long looked at him questioningly and asked what was going on. Lin Xiu glanced at the system radar and said the situation was dangerous and their presence had disturbed the Special Operations Bureau, which was now organizing a raid to capture them. Kui Long began to drool and thought that its food was running straight into his jaws. Lin Xiu snapped at him, shouting that all he ever thought about was eating. If Kui Long wanted to be useful, then he should figure out how to escape their pursuit instead of dreaming about food. At that moment, the little dogs tugged at Lin Xiu's pants, barking as though trying to guide him. Lin Xiu stopped, startled, and wondered what was happening to them, so he and Kui Long watched closely. Kui Long explained that the small dogs were saying a vast underground cave lay ahead, deep enough for them to hide in. Lin Xiu frowned because hiding underground to escape from people made him feel like he was already becoming the very kind of monster they feared. Lin Xiu asked the system if going underground would help conceal the spiritual energy emanating from the monsters. One of the little dogs adjusted itself against him, nudging closer so he could pet it, and the system responded that the answer was uncertain. However, it noted that the radar had not picked up these small mutant dogs earlier. Lin Xiu thought back. At first he had only wanted to test the taming ability. He never imagined that at such a critical moment, these little creatures would prove so useful. With newfound confidence, he pointed toward the direction ahead and declared that this was their only option because they had no other choice anyway. The party set off together, and Kui Long glanced at the rocky terrain and remarked that he had noticed something strange about this place. The dogs were saying there was a much larger cavern ahead, big enough to shelter them all. Before long, they arrived at the site, and the group carefully examined the territory. Lin Xiu stepped closer, staring into the opening, and admitted that he did not feel like going down there at all. Kui Long took the initiative, telling his master to stay put, and he would go down first. Without waiting for a reply, the dragon leaped into the darkness with the little dogs following after him. Lin Xiu shouted for them to wait, but it was already too late. The dugout opened into a vast underground chamber, lined with long, winding hills of stone and soil. He commanded the system to analyze whether this cavern could truly hide their spiritual energy. The system complied and reported back because the response of their energy had indeed weakened inside, though it was still not enough to completely conceal Kui Long's overwhelming presence. Lin Xiu narrowed his eyes, and from what he could see, the reaction of their energy had diminished significantly, but not entirely. He began to climb down into the cave himself, deciding that Kui Long needed to be informed, and they would have to move even deeper into the cave. Kui Long sensed the fall and caught his master in time, roaring in frustration. Kui Long had told Lin Xiu to stay on the surface while he was going down. Lin Xiu flinched, startled by the dragon's voice, but quickly forced a nervous smile. He explained that he hadn't hidden well enough above and had come down to check. Together, they surveyed the cavern, which stretched vast and deep, its shadows swallowing their presence, the air thick with muted spiritual energy. Lin Xiu breathed a sigh of relief and declared that the cave really did conceal them, and they were lucky. Kui Long, however, rumbled a warning that it was too soon to celebrate as he directed Lin Xiu's gaze to the walls, where long, jagged claw marks scored the stone. Lin Xiu leaned closer, unease knotting his chest, and wondered what that meant, so Kui Long explained that something had dug an enormous network of tunnels there. The boy's heart pounded as he realized that something enormous lived in these depths. He nervously forced a weak laugh and convinced himself that it was impossible because it was only an E-rank mystic realm. If monsters that size existed here, the Bureau would have discovered them long ago. Kui Long agreed that the tunnels masked spiritual energy, which was the only reason they had descended. But then Kui Long froze as its nostrils flared because it caught a foul, unnatural scent. Kui Long growled because something nasty lurked ahead, and without another word he lunged into the darkness, the pack of little mutant dogs charging at his side. Lin Xiu shouted at them to wait off him, scrambling after them, while his voice echoed helplessly through the cavern. They burst into a chamber, and the sight before Lin Xiu wrenched the breath from his throat. The tunnel walls were bristling with massive fangs jutting like pale knives from the stone. In the center, a mountain of corpses rose grotesque and high, the stench of blood thick in the air. Lin Xiu's scream cracked through the silence, wondering what kind of nightmare that was. At the peak of the mound, fresh remains glistened atop the decaying heap, making Lin Xiu's stomach tighten. This was bad because if Kui Long was right, then continuing to devour corpses there would expose them, no matter how well the cave concealed spiritual energy. But Kui Long was already drooling, his eyes shining with hunger, so the dragon bounded forward, climbing eagerly toward the pile of rotting remains stacked high atop scattered bones. Panic gripped Lin Xiu as he shouted at the top of his lungs, demanding to know where this mountain of flesh had come from. His voice echoed wildly, but before he could finish, the ground shuddered. With a sickening crash, something vast dropped from above and slammed onto the heap of corpses. Dust and bone fragments scattered through the air. Lin Xiu froze as a hulking monster emerged before his eyes. At that moment, a system window flashed before him the details about the ferocious beast Fengshi. It has a juvenile form and it belongs to the general bloodline. The creature loomed tall and heavy, its bulk radiating ancient pressure. It was no ordinary beast, but a remnant of the deepest antiquity, the one whose existence was whispered only in miraculous legends. Slothful and gluttonous by nature, the wild beast rarely surfaced from its hidden domain. Yet now it stood before them, eyes glimmering with greedy hunger.
Guys, that's the end of the video. If you liked this video, please leave a comment in the comment section. Also subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Like the video and share it too. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.